Why, hello there. It is 29 days until Elden Ring comes out on February 25th, 2022, and this is the Elden Wait Countdown, where today I'll be covering some more details from the Elden Ring Overture Mook, as well as finishing up our item descriptions about the Tarnished from the closed network test. Let's get into it. So first I am covering some information that came out from a Miyazaki interview in the Elden Ring Overture that was published in Japan in Japanese, and it has now been translated so that we've gotten the information and there's some good stuff there. I would like to give thanks to Reddit user Y1758 for providing some translations on Reddit, and I also used a bit of Mordecai's video just to help round out the information, but I'm going to sort of quickly move through some of the bullet points and then settle in on a few more story and lore focused topics that I'm personally interested in talking just a bit more about. And I also want to cover it sort of quickly because tomorrow is dropping an 18-page interview from Game Informer, and there will also be a stream with Dan Tack, who wrote the article and did the cover story for Game Informer. He will be answering questions, so there's going to be a ton of information coming out tomorrow. So now would be a great time to subscribe to the channel so that you can get all the information as it comes out. But getting into the Elden Ring Overture information, I want to talk about a couple mechanics things that came out through the interview. The first is that there are 50 different spirit summons in Elden Ring. We have only seen a few of them in the network test and in various screenshots, so that is very exciting because it sounds like there are a ton of options and I can't wait to get all of them in the full release. The next item is that there won't be any multiplayer covenants like we know them in Dark Souls, but there will be a system akin to covenants that are more PvE focused. And this is something that has been mentioned before, and I think there's been some people that are confused that there are no covenants like we understand them, and I don't think Elden Ring needs to have them. From Software wanted to lower the barriers to engaging in multiplayer in Elden Ring, and it sounds like there's something probably more like faction based. I don't know how formal it is, but it seems like there'll be something more PvE related. We're probably siding with different people. We'll give some sort of covenant or faction system, but this is sort of speculation on my part, and we will see what it looks like in just 29 days. The next item is that there is some more character freedom with how you build out your character. In Elden Ring, we will be free to change the appearance of our character at any time, as well as we'll be able to respec our character's stats, although for the respec for stats there will be some limitations. And now a few topics about the world of Elden Ring, specifically the open world. Miyazaki said that what they really wanted with Elden Ring was a sense of adventure versus just exploration, and the differentiation he made was that it's not about providing a ton of stuff and just going thoroughly through all these dungeons in the world, but having an expansive world where you can get lost in and go have crazy things happen. The main route of the game, as mentioned the other day, is 30 hours, and as we've learned, this is a smaller portion of the total game than in other games, so there will be a ton more side content and optional content compared to previous titles. And that makes sense because Miyazaki said that the open world of the full release is about 10 times the size of what we saw in the closed network tests. And talking about the open world, important landmarks are well defined out in the world and easy to see so that the player is sort of guided visually, and optional stuff is not quite as obvious, and overall the design of the open world is more loose than their typical design, and that's because they wanted to encourage moving throughout the world and not feeling like you need to explore everything. And it is important to Miyazaki to keep players out in the world, and he said that stuff like the Stakes of Marika and that item crafting were implemented to keep players out adventuring in the open world instead of needing to return back to a hub or a previous site of Lost Grace, so they could stay out in the world going on adventures. And out in the world on these adventures, there will be lots of crazy enemies and situations, but also more freedom to escape them. And with that freedom also comes more ruthless encounters, where Miyazaki said that with this they've had the opportunity to provide some really intense situations, and he laughed, which is the most terrifying thing in the world. So now let's dig into a few story items that were brought up in the interview. The first is that there is a more traditional Firekeeper type person in the game. So it seems like it's possible that Melina is not our permanent sort of firekeeper, and Miyazaki has mentioned that she has her own ambitions and is not your traditional firekeeper type person. I'm assuming it is a regular finger maiden out there who will fulfill the role that the Two Fingers intended for the finger maidens to help the Tarnished. Which really just begs the questions, what happens with Melina? I think she's such a compelling character, and this fact only makes her more compelling to me. Speaking of compelling characters, the Snow Witch is a big part of a certain storyline in the game, so she wasn't just part of the story trailer, but she is, as we imagined, a big part of the world in a certain way, and I'm very interested to learn more about her. And unsurprisingly, the moon is also important in the world of Elden Ring, and I think that is somewhat obvious because the moon in the closed network test never moves. It is omnipresent, day or night, and it just stays there looming up very large in the sky. And we know that the moon provides protection for Karia, so we already know that it has more of a presence and something of a will or something. There is stuff going on with the moon, and Miyazaki has only further reinforced this. And on a particularly fun note, Miyazaki said that with Godfrey in that key art that we've seen is what he calls the Chancellor's Beast, but I've also seen it written as the Beast Chancellor, and I'm torn on which one I like more. He seems like he is very important and sort of buddy-buddy with Godfrey, and I like the idea of him being the Chancellor's Beast, where Godfrey is the Chancellor in this case, but I also really like the term Beast Chancellor because we have a Beast Clergyman with Grank, and then we have a Beast Chancellor, and I just want to collect all the different Beast titles in the game. And now for the kind of big piece of story information, and it relates to what we talked about yesterday about the immortality of the Tarnished, where the interviewer asked Miyazaki about the demigods and their immortality. They said, Godwyn is the first demigod to die, but do the demigods gain their immortality from the guidance of grace as well? And they're piggybacking off the previous question where Miyazaki said that the reason the Tarnished are immortal is because the guidance of grace is keeping them alive, and I talk about that more in yesterday's video. But Miyazaki answered, no, that's different. I don't think this is the right time to talk about these details, but the immortality of the demigods is associated with the removal of Fate's death from the Elden Ring. At the moment, you won't know what I'm talking about, but as you play the game, this should become clearer. And boy, is that a big sort of thing to drop into our laps, at least for me, because we have wondered why the demigods are different, and it seems like they really had a hand in it, that they removed Fate's death from the Elden Ring, which is super interesting because in all other ways, they very much are all about the natural cycle of life and death, and they're very much against undeath and living past death. So the removal of Fate's death is making them immortal and sort of pulling them out of the natural cycle. And I think from the story trailer, we find that the death rune has been taken and used in a way that could kill the demigods. And it seems like it is some kind of comeuppance because the telescope item description said it fettered the fate writ in the night sky. So the demigods were supposed to die, or there was supposed to be something that ended their immortality. There was a fate for them, and they tried to skirt around it, is how I'm interpreting it. So there's a bit of speculation going on here, but it really seems like there's a natural progression that the demigods were sort of trying to avoid. But that was a big bombshell to sort of drop into our laps, and those are my thoughts on it right now. There's not enough to really talk a whole lot about how that plays out, but it definitely feeds into this idea I've been promoting that sort of similar to Dark Souls, but also From Software games in general. They're very interested in those in power and how they grasp and keep power and what they do in order to not lose it. And it seems like in this case with the demigods and immortality, that might be what is happening. And now we get into our item description for today. It is the second item description talking about the Tarnished in the closed network test, and it is the Tarnished Blossom, which says, a large flower that blooms facing the Erd tree. Material used for crafting items. Exceedingly rare to find. Though wilted and faded, it still retains holy essence. And I think it is pretty obvious here that the Tarnished Blossom is kind of a metaphor for the Tarnished themselves, or it was named after them because it's wilted and faded, but it still retains that holy essence in the same way that the Tarnished lost their grace. But even within them, there is some core that still remains a bit of that holy essence. And it is a large flower that blooms facing the Erd Tree, and that feels like it's about the Tarnished and how they are beckoned to the lands between, and that they are heading to the Erd Tree, and that they are trying to restore the Elden Ring. And there you have it, day 29. Things are really picking up. We are having a ton of stuff coming in. Not only do we have Game Informer dropping an 18-page interview tomorrow, and a stream talking even more about their 10 hours of playing the game, but it sounds like there will be footage dropping next week from Game Informer, and that it is likely that an embargo will go up with other creators, as I mentioned the other day. It seems like UK-based creators like FighterPL and Scirocco have mentioned that they were going to get some access to Elden Ring, and I think it may be something similar with Game Informer, where they got some time with the game and they may be sharing impressions or something along those lines. And that seems like it is coming out next week, and who knows what else. And I will be covering everything that comes out in the next few weeks, so if you want to stay up to date on it, consider subscribing to the channel. And once the game releases, then I will be getting into tons of lore stuff. But we have a ton of activity happening, and it is very exciting. And with that, I am going to get to bed. I am tired. Thanks for watching.